If it looks like me, then it probably is me. I want to share with you 3 things that you need to know about when you go into competitions. These are my personal opinions and have been developed over many years of being involved with bonsai and judging competitions, so take it with a grain of salt. That's all. The first thing that you need to consider is additional context. Let me explain what I mean by that. In our mind, we usually make a decision on whether something is good or not, beautiful or not, based on how it looks. And this applies to bonsai as well. However, when judging competitions, there are other factors that come into play, which actually contribute a lot more to the final score. So these are the things that we need to look at and consider when we judge competitions. But they were also very important when we go and visit a nursery or even buy a bonsai online. We should be aware of them because if we understand them, we can make better decisions on which bonsai to buy and which bonsai would be suitable for us. So let's take a look at some examples. So here I have 2 trees, both of them Chinese elm. They are both grown in the same soil, in the same pot, under the same conditions. You may think that one is better because it has got more ramification, which is true. But this tree, even though it looks smaller and not as developed, is 23 years old, and this is only 8 years old. So these 2 trees will develop differently. This one will eventually catch up and overtake this one, but this one will get there much slower. So this is something that we need to consider. Is this tree worth the money? Is this tree worth the investment of time and effort? Because even though it is smaller now, it is older and therefore rarer because there are less of them around. And also because it takes longer to grow, it will mature slower. So this tree will be ready for exhibition maybe only in 10 years from now, whereas this one could be ready in 5 years. So knowing this extra information about the tree will help us decide whether it's worth the money, whether it's worth the investment, and whether we are prepared to wait longer for this tree to develop and to reach its full potential. The second thing that we need to consider is the category fit. When entering a competition, each tree needs to be entered into a correct category. This is done so that we can compare apples with apples. Imagine if the sky was put into the small tree category. It just wouldn't be fair because it's already too big. And imagine if the sky was entered into the veteran tree category, it would also not be fair because it's not a veteran tree. So we have categories for different sizes, different species, different styles, and different ages. If we enter a tree into the wrong category, we might be penalized for something that is actually normal for that particular tree. For example, if we enter a Chinese elm into the fine branch category, then the ramification might be penalized because Chinese elms naturally have thicker branches and fewer branches. So we don't expect them to have the same level of refinement as a Japanese maple. Or if we enter a juniper into the cascade style category, the lack of taper might be penalized because we expect a cascade style to have a nice taper. And the juniper doesn't really taper that much. So it is important to understand the rules of the competition and enter the tree into the correct category. This applies to bonsai exhibitions as well. When you go to see an exhibition, each tree is placed into a category. So you can actually compare trees that are similar in size, age, style, species, and appreciate them in their own category. Knowing the category also helps us understand how the tree has been trained and grown to achieve the form that we see today. Some styles are naturally more suitable for certain species. For example, we naturally expect a pine to be in a formal upright position because they have that natural taper. And we naturally expect a Japanese maple to have a nice cascade because they have that natural graceful movement. The category also tells us about the age of the tree. When we see a veteran tree, we can expect it to be quite old because it's placed in the veteran category. So we know that it's a mature tree. Same thing with the shoin. When we see a shohan, we know that it's a small tree because it's placed in the small tree category. Therefore, the age of the tree is not as important. So all of this information is given away by the category that the bonsai is placed in. So it is important to read the information given and appreciate the tree in the context of its category. The third thing that we need to know is provenance. Now, provenance means origin. Where did this bonsai come from? Who owns the bonsai before it came to you? How long have you had it? And has it always been this size? So this information gives us some context about the history of this tree. Has this tree been cultivated or has it come from the wild? Has it been growing naturally in the wild for many years? Was it collected as a seedling or as a mature tree? Was it planted in a pot recently or has it been in a pot for a long time? All of these questions are important because it gives us some context to the tree and helps us understand how this tree has arrived at this point. Bonsai are living pieces of art. They are living trees that have been cultivated by humans. And just like any other piece of art, we want to know who created it. If we go to an art gallery and see a painting, we want to know who painted it because we want to understand the skill, the effort, the time that went into creating this piece of art, and this applies to bonsai as well. When we know that a bonsai has been in the hands of a master for many years, has been worked on by a master, and has taken many years to achieve this form, then we can appreciate the skill, the effort, the time, and the love that has gone into cultivating that bonsai. It is a privilege to be able to touch and to hold in your hands a piece of history. Unfortunately, sometimes provenance is lost when bonsai change hands. People forget to ask where the bonsai originated from, who owned it previously, and how long it has been in a pot. I try to keep track of all the trees that I sell and where they end up. And whenever I see a photo of them, I keep them in a group so that I can see how they develop and how they turn out in the future. I would love to be able to keep track of all the trees that I sold over the last 10 years and see how they are doing now. Unfortunately, I don't have the resources to do that. And this is also a reminder to you that whenever you buy a bonsai, find out a little bit about its history. How long has it been in a pot? Who owned it previously? Where it came from? Because all of this is part of the story of that bonsai and makes it unique. So those are 3 things that you need to know when going into competitions. But I think it's also important to know when not to go into competitions. If you are new to bonsai, you might want to avoid going into competitions because it is very easy to be critical of other people's bonsai and feel bad about your own. If you haven't yet developed your own style, you might want to avoid going into competitions. Going into competitions and seeing what other people have done can sometimes make you feel self-conscious and worried about what other people think. And finally, if you don't have a support system, people that encourage you and support you in your journey, then you might want to avoid going into competitions because it can be very discouraging. Sometimes we get feedback that is not constructive and not very encouraging. So having a support system is very important when going through difficult times. Remember, competitions are for everyone. So regardless of your level, don't be afraid to go in there and give it a go. Worst case scenario, you'll get some feedback that you can improve on next time. Best case scenario, you win. But most importantly, you meet like-minded people and build a community. And remember, if it looks like me, then it probably is me.